from, because if you don't sort of know the precedence that's been set and where you've been, then it's difficult to kind of know, okay, what's this stuff all about? So what they did was they completed the Human Genome Project in 2003. Okay. And so they were just, they were looking at several different things, and it was a lot of genes, and it was just so big that what they did was later on, about 5 years later, they started the 1,000 Genome Project in 2008. And so they would look at these genes, and they isolated about a little over 1,000 genes, 1,092 genes. Since then, which was October of 2012, since then, what these geneticists have done is they've discovered, different other genes that they're hoping that are clinically relevant. Because some genes, and I'll go over this, when they have certain mutations, it will change the behavior of that enzyme, okay, that affects different things in the body, okay? But since then, there's been, again, about 1,500 genes. And then now we have some new advances with new instruments and new technologies that actually make it affordable, okay? But, for most people, they don't know what we're talking about. We're talking about what's called a SNP. And so it's a single nucleotide polymorphism. And basically, you have pairs of genes, and you have two alleles. One can, or both can, have genetic mutations that changes the behavior of certain enzymes that we have in proteins that can upregulate that enzyme, can downregulate, or do nothing. So that is sort of the clinical relevancy that comes into play with sort of how Dr. Stewart developed this particular genetic test based on real clinical results and things like that. Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah. So knowing that is going to give us an insight on what's actually happening to
Right.
everybody that might be struggling with any type of things that we're going to be getting to. Obviously, this next slide kind of covers up a little bit where we're kind of going with that. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So as you can see, we're looking at how certain enzymes that work together can affect the absorption of certain nutrients, can affect your metabolism, can affect your detox pathways. And so we're looking at all of those effects. And what we want to do is take a scientific approach to this and base it on each person's individual genotype, which means how do you express your genes and what does that mean to you? Not your neighbor, not your mom and dad, not family member, but you specifically. So what Dr. Osweiler has trained on for quite some time now is how do I take a more functional, more precise approach to his practice and being able to customize individual plans for each different patient that he sees.
Yeah. So what I've been noticing is when we've been doing this is when we're looking at, again, like the slide talks about absorption and metabolism, elimination, there's so many factors that we're getting great results with, but we needed a little bit of help. And what I noticed is as we are correcting these things based upon, again, somebody's DNA, what's going on with the SNPs, we're seeing really neat effects on overall health. And again, people, we always have a tendency, we want to be healthy, we want to lose weight, I want to be able to keep it off or whatever that is. And if you don't have all the information, there's that percentage of population that's actually going to have a hard time with with that type of thing because they're not getting the absorption of nutrients. So therefore their body might go through a process, or again, metabolism is absolutely key here. So I think is the next slide. Are we at?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're just kind of
Okay.
looking at, some of the chronic type of syndromes that are associated with your genes, and your genes can play a big role in some of these chronic disorders that is often treated. And we want to be able to say, okay, yes, these affect your overall quality of life and health. And if some of these things may be more severe or than others, but when someone doesn't feel good and they may have something chronic in nature going on, it could be just headaches. But unless you're that person experiencing those headaches, and if you haven't experienced them before, those can be extremely taxing and difficult for you to say, hey, I want to go and get in the gym 4 days a week. I want to stick to my diet plan or whatever those things are. If there's things that are chronic in nature happening with you, that we want to address those concerns as well.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. If somebody's not feeling good,
Right.
a lot of times they choose food for comfort, or they have a headache, or they might want to do something or the same thing. Their blood sugar is going to play a major role in again, headaches, migraines, etc. I mean, people can be down for the count with just a quote a simple headache, and it's not so simple, especially if you can't go to work,
Right.
go to school. Even for kids in high school. The thing that I really looks at this, if you look at this and you go, I really don't have any of those. Well, there's a lot of other things going on, behind the scenes, whether it's fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, neuralgias, neuropathies, ADD, post-concussion syndrome. I mean, that is a really big deal, especially for kids. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that in a non-contact sport like females in soccer. So
Yeah.
we're doing some really neat stuff with that, and this is actually opening more doors to help those people do really, really well, because
Sure.
we know what happens down road with concussions and so forth, anxiety, depression. I mean, if the neurotransmitters aren't working and
Right.
dementias, I mean, that hits home for me on a personal standpoint, because that's really one of my driving forces to doing what we're doing and helping people overcome these health issues and catching it. Because it's not like, hey, I'm going to start, my memory's not so good, what should I do now? We should get to start 5-15 years before that ever happens. I mean, I've
Right.
seen on a personal standpoint somebody just plummet within the last 5 years and 3, and there's things we could have did ahead of time. But now that
Sure.
we know more that we're having, and we're just seeing some really neat stuff. So this list is just a just a little bit of what we're seeing people respond to with this type of information. So these are the
Right.
big ones. These are the ones that people really want to stay away from. But it's all that other stuff that they're doing really well with too.
Well, and
So
I'm thinking of things like hypertension. And so we test for a gene called the ACE gene. If
yeah,
you have, two mutations on that gene, you just have a higher risk for developing high blood pressure, which is called the silent killer, right? It doesn't affect you over 2 or 3 years, it affects you over 25 years. And if you don't do anything about it, then that's when you run into trouble later in life. The same thing with Alzheimer's, right? We know from scientific studies now that that's going to manifest 25 years before you start seeing any symptoms with that.
yeah.
So we want to just identify those things, and there are certain genes that we look at that can identify higher risk factors for certain things, and we can look at heading those off before they become a problem. Now,
And heading that off, it's like you mentioned blood pressure. I just consulted with a patient, and their kidneys are like pretty much shot, failing because of high blood pressure medication. And
yeah,
getting in front of that, I mean, they're looking at possible dialysis, phase 4. So
sure.
it's really about changing, getting ahead of it, not waiting until you feel bad, right? I mean, that's
Right,
what it's about.
right. And that is, areas that Dr. Stewart focuses on. And these are all the reason he chose these 5 categories that we're looking at. Most physicians, most doctors will agree that chronic systemic inflammation is the root of all disease. Okay. And
Yeah.
one of the major focal points, if we're going to have success with just being healthy, whatever fitness goals you have, or weight goals, or whatever those are, you want to feel good while you're doing it. And if you're inflamed, it's just not going to happen, and it's not going to happen effectively. So on the genetic test, Dr. Stewart has identified 8 on and off switches of the immune system, and Dr. Osweiler is trained in how we address those polymorphisms that we looked at, those SNPs on those particular on switches, meaning how you deal with oxidative stress, how you deal with triggering events that can turn on excessive inflammation. And then we want to see how you, once that crisis is over, maybe, God forbid, you get into a car wreck, or you have a concussion, or a family member dies and you have emotional trauma, or you get a major infection. Those are all oxidative stressors, right, that turn on inflammation. And then we want to see, okay, after that crisis is over, what is going on with the state of your immune system? Is it continuing to rev up higher and produce inflammation? Because if you have a off switch that has been mutated, then you're not going to be able to send the signal to the immune system that says, hey guys, time out, we need to reduce inflammation. You've done your job. Because the body's going to heal itself 2 ways: inflame it or heat it up, right? And so it's looking at these categories here, like inflammation, our detox pathways, and then the gasoline for our body is methylation, right? Which is responsible for over 250 biochemical processes in our body. So having methylated vitamins, or having a strong methylation system that feeds these multiple biochemical processes, is not, and it's very similar to high blood pressure. You sometimes don't see the long-term effects till several years down the road, okay, over time. Also, we look at your neurotransmitters, where Dr. Osweiler can tell genetically if you have a high probability of being more sensitive, because when he goes in and starts making these changes, okay, which he's going to show you the biochemistry behind this. You can't fake biochemistry. We also, with the genetic report, have all the parenthetical documentation in the bibliography in the back of each genetic report. So it has all the white papers where you can go on PubMed and read all the research behind the genes. And then the third thing is real clinical results. So if you have the genetics and the biochemistry without having the clinical experience, then you're not going to have a frame of reference, because just because things work biochemically in the academic world doesn't mean they work in clinic. And what Dr. Osweiler does is deal with real people and develops specific, targeted, more of a precise plan for each individual patient, and not just saying, okay, here's a shotgun approach that's going to work for everybody, because everyone's different.
Well, once we added, and again, one of our key focal points or foundations is the genomic testing for nutrigenomics, because, when you have an idea and for a fact that somebody's their gut isn't going to be healthy, maybe because they should be staying away from gluten. Well, then that's going to create an inflammation issue. Are they going to be able to detoxify properly? No. having that good bacteria in the gut. I mean, that is a huge issue from everything from weight loss, feeling good, anxiety, depression, etc. All those feel good hormones, everything has to be working together. So this has been an integral part of what we're doing when we're personalizing and customizing these programs for patients that are just, again, they're the ones that were struggling, they're not struggling anymore. And it's been fantastic. It's kind of why I wanted to do a quick little, overview of how this works so people can take a look at it. And
even some of your patients that may be eating non-GMO, all organic, and just eating as clean as possible can be causing oxidative stress and those triggering events I explained earlier on those on switches just with diet. So if they have a gluten sensitivity, they can really create an allergic response that creates oxidative stress and turns on inflammation. Also, foods like spinach, tomatoes, eggplant, those are all high in histamines. We check a gene that indicates if you have a histamine intolerance. So you could be drinking kombachas and eating healthy from your garden and be as sick as can be because you don't activate an enzyme that breaks down those histamines in those very healthy foods the same way another person would. So this can really give Dr. Osweiler a lot of clues to how you're built.
That's interesting because that reminds me of one of the, again, it's been a while, but a patient that same thing, we went over and she's made some changes, doing the right things. And she's like, wow, you know what? I can sleep on my side longer. And I got this problem. All this stuff is starting to change just because we had just one little clue based upon her genetics on what's going on with her and how she could change how good she's feeling. Because they think it's age related. Oh man, I'm getting older, so I'm feeling so bad. It's over time, the stuff builds up and we make these changes and it's almost so simple.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and the whole idea, I'll move to the next slide so you guys can see it, but basically the first bullet point here, the main thing is clinically relevant. So there's plenty of genes out there that you can have, mutations on, and they're not clinically relevant. They don't make you feel bad. They're not impacting in any way we know at this time. But basically, we're talking about vitamins. We're talking about putting back in the body what may not be converting biochemically because of those mutations. And so when you can identify that and put back in the body what's missing, a lot of times that can help in optimizing your overall health is the whole idea.
Yeah, we're seeing that for sure.
Right. And so one of the things, Dr. Stewart, he's going to be lecturing next week at the World Congress for Anti-Aging, and he teaches a continuing medical education course to doctors. And every time that he talks, he says that he has 4 primary rules of healing. Well, the last one is something that almost all doctors do, right, is assist with patients' symptoms, right? We want to make you feel better. But the 3 that we see are the ones that Dr. Osweiler is now focusing on, because if we don't control and eliminate inflammation, then the other things are not going to work as well, right? And the analogy is you hurt your knee and it swells up and you continue to go for a jog every day, how well is your knee going to heal? And
exactly.
The answer is it's not, right? So obviously if you're inflamed, you're not going to be goals.
You're right. And looks like we got about 7 minutes left here.
Okay.
Inflammation was written up in Time, years ago. I forgot how long it was. They're calling that a silent killer too, because it was on the cover of Time. It's not a medical journal, but the information has been out there so long. Inflammation is a key to, again, being healthy, losing weight, keeping it
Right.
off, having a great, getting up in the morning and not feeling horrible. I mean, and then along with that, again, nutritional elements, mitochondria. You're not going to have proper energy if mitochondria aren't working. Those are the little power plants of the cells. And there's so many things like you mentioned earlier with methylation and so forth. Is if those aren't working, people are
Right.
trying. Well, how can I have more energy? Well, it's a multi-therapeutic approach. It's more. It's not just one thing. It's
Right.
more than that. So
It's several things, and doing those at the right time.
exactly.
And one of the big things that people don't realize is in the mitochondria, that's where we convert cholesterol to pregnenolone. And pregnenolone is the mother precursor hormone that makes all your other hormones.
Yeah.
So by looking at the overall health of certain proteins, like in the electron transport chain and things like that, that Dr. Osweiler will go over, he can identify, hey, how good are your batteries? Do we need to do something that will assist with that? Okay, and how do we balance you in all those areas? Okay. So that this is the genomics nutrition is there's a 55 gene panel in those 5 categories that will give Dr. Osweiler a lot of clues again on how each individual is genetically built, because the analogy that Dr. Stewart uses is like if you're making vegetable soup, and when you're going to make vegetable soup, if you're smart, you will open up your refrigerator and see what vegetables you have first, right? Because if you don't do that and you go to the grocery store, what are you going to do? Well, the answer is you're going to have to buy everything. So nutrigenomic testing tells you what vitamins you need, but more importantly, tells you what you don't need. So that's sort of the takeaway. An example of that is we test for a gene called FUT2. And if you're homozygous, or if you have 2 mutations on that gene, you don't secrete important fucosal sugars to be able to grow good probiotics in the bowel. And so those people would need a probiotic every day. But the inverse is also true. You may be taking a probiotic every day and not have a mutation there, and you certainly don't need one every day. Okay, so that's the whole idea, is we don't want you wasting money on things that you don't necessarily need, and the genetics will tell Dr. Osweiler which ones you need and what you don't need.
I get that question all the time. People ask me, "What do I need to do on a daily basis?" Take it. Take a probiotic, do this, do that. And there's a lot of chatter out there and misinformation, but when you can hone in on what you personally need, it's going to make the biggest difference than in your health and your vitality that you're going to see. Everybody thinks, oh, you should be on this, and I hear it all the time. There's companies out there, that's all they do is they promote that, and it's just,
Right.
there's so much more to it than meets the eye, if you will, right?
Right. So one of the things that Dr. Osweiler offers is certain supplements that have been built with the compression model design. And what I mean by that these were built with certain cofactors built in and other ingredients in the right ratios, so that he's giving you a few things based on your genetic results, and you're opening up on a certain category that you may have issues with, you're opening up 1 bottle instead of 5, right? Certain supplement companies will try to sell you as many supplements as they can, and that's not the goal for any of this testing. It's just to give you the ones you need and what you don't need, and it's a more personalized approach. So the reason that Dr. Stewart chose Neurobiologics is he was responsible for developing these over 8 years ago, and they match up to your particular SNPs on the genes that you have. And he uses a lot of biochemistry in when teaching the doctors why they need them. But it's been proven with the success of his patients and how well they're doing after the genetic testing. And then these are pharmaceutical grade, and the GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Practices, and it's certified. So if you're a manufacturer of pharmaceutical grade supplements, you have to meet certain standards in the industry in order to have that quality that is not food grade. Okay, so that's some of the important things that most people don't realize.
Yeah, well, you know what? We're going to have to wrap it up here because I know I told everybody what we're going to try to get done here. So this is just a great introduction, and I want to say thanks so much, Brad, for set up here. And you guys definitely know how to get in touch with me, and I appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you for being here. We can get into some more detail later, and we'd like to do that with you guys on obviously a personal basis. So let's wrap this up and say thanks so much.
Great. Thanks for having me, Doc. I appreciate it.
All right, Brad. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.